Hello everyone. I, Dr. Rubal Barar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Cultural Studies and Foreign Languages at GSS TGS Khalsa College Patiala, Punjab, India, will be today engaging you in the analysis of the great classic of Victorian nonsense literature Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. The book Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There is infused with Carroll's unique sense of humour and reflects his love of punning and sophisticated play on language. The illustrations of the book by John Tenniel were immediately popular as they managed to capture Carroll's spirit of whimsy and adventure. Once again, as in the previous book, Alice comes into contact with unusual people and anthropomorphic flora and fauna. In particular, the wool and water episode is memorable for its imaginative portrayal of a dark little shop in which objects float from one shelf onto another and ultimately through the ceiling. In his three-part scene with Alice first in the shop, then outside, rowing down a little stream, and then back in the shop again, the reader is led ever deeper into a world of non-reality. Carroll permits his heroine to test her senses of sight, sound, smell, and touch, but does not allow her to experience taste. Therefore, Alice and ultimately the reader is stopped from totally experiencing this episode as reality. Alice buys a little egg in the shop but is not allowed to eat it. Instead, the sheep places it at a distance from her and informs Alice that in this shop people must get things for themselves. The egg turns into Humpty Dumpty before she can get it, and Alice is thrown headlong into another adventure. In literary nonsense, certain formal elements of language and logic that facilitate meaning are balanced by elements that negate meaning. That is, we find a fine balancing of sense and nonsense in Carroll's writing. These formal elements include semantics, syntax, phonetics, context, representation, and formal diction. Various techniques or devices are used to create the balance of meaning and lack of meaning, such as faulty cause and effect, portmanteau, neologism, reversals and inversions, imprecisions that also includes gibberish, simultaneity, picture or text incongruity, arbitrariness, infinite repetition, negativity or mirroring, and misappropriation. The nonsense tautology, reduplication, and absurd precision have also been used in the nonsense genre. For a text to be within the genre of literary nonsense, it must have an abundance of nonsense techniques woven into the fabric of the piece. If the text employs only occasional nonsense devices, then it may not be classified as literary nonsense, though there may be a nonsensical effect to certain portions of the work. Both of the Alice's tales give voice to the Victorian desire to overcome restrictive environments, demonstrated to some degree through Carroll's use of parody to open traditionally closed literary formats. Beverley Lyon Clark asserts that Carroll's use of both open and closed fields, as well as his unique integration of text and poetry, constitutes a new approach in Victorian writing for children. Physically, The movement in the two stories is from indoor settings to outdoor environments. In Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Alice passes through the restrictive environment of a rabbit hole and yearns to be free in the wonderful garden. Her most vibrant adventures take place primarily in the outdoors. Her indoor experiences are generally more frustrating and uncomfortable, although the outdoor adventures have their own share of difficulties. The same is the case in Through the Looking Glass. Alice passes through the closed-in setting of the Looking Glass house and heads immediately for the outdoors. Since that entire country is laid out in chessboard fashion, Alice cannot see the limits of her existence as she proceeds along her journey. Therefore, the environment has no discernible boundaries. The quest for freedom is one of the primary themes of the two works. Whether one considers the journey as being in concert with Alice's rather precocious mindset, which might have led her into trouble in a Victorian environment, or delving further, the concept of the dream story as representing a liberating ideal, there is a distinct air of unbridled joy about these works. They seem to invite readers of all ages and from all times to revel with Carol in places and with people and creatures who are not bound by the usual rules and regulations. Now, let's take up the analysis of the book chapter-wise. In his stories, Lewis Carroll blurs the boundaries between being awake and being asleep, so that it becomes difficult to tell where reality ends and dreaming begins. At the beginning of the first chapter, Alice enjoys a drowsy winter nap near the fire. She leaves her chair only to snatch up Kitty and place her on her knee. It can thus be interpreted that Alice dozes off in this position, and her step through the mirror happens only in her dream. Since she is only half asleep, Alice's experiences combine elements from the waking world and her dreams. The dream motive of Through the Looking Glass differs from the one found in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, for here Alice exercises some control over what she encounters in her fantasy world. Alice's repeated pleas to Kitty to play pretend emphasize her desire to exert some control over her imagination. Alice discovers that the room on the other side of the mirror is nearly identical to her old room, showing the motive of inversion that keeps on reappearing throughout the text. The alternate dimension is not just a mirror image, but a comprehensive inversion of reality. In the Looking Glass house, Alice no longer needs a fire, since the winter of the real world becomes summer in the imagined world, where the gardens are in bloom and the trees are filled with leaves. Even the inanimate objects in Alice's old room, such as the pictures and the mantel clock, spring to life. Alice appears invisible to the chess pieces, which is one aspect of the inversion that occurs in Looking Glass house. In Alice's world, she is alive, while the chess pieces are inanimate, but Looking Glass world belongs to the chess pieces. where they have a working order to their lives. Like the chessboard, their lives are highly symmetrical and controlled. Alice's invisibility suggests that she maintains a godlike power over the chessmen of Looking Glass world, which stems from the fact that the whole universe exists as part of her imagination. Alice picks up the White Queen and the White King as if she were a divine power manipulating the lives of the chess pieces. This establishes the idea of the chessboard as a plane of existence upon which individuals are positioned like chess pieces and moved around according to predetermined rules. Inside the house, Alice's invisibility allows her to be an unseen hand, but the image of the chessboard gains its full significance in the next chapter, when she joins the chess game outside. There, Alice becomes a chess piece herself, manipulated by an unseen hand, presumably the author's hand, that is, of Lewis Carroll. The imposition of this hand starts to become apparent when Alice loses control over her own body and floats down the stairs, propelled forward toward her destiny by the unseen hand of the author. Just like in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Alice acts as an explorer in Looking Glass world also. Recalling other explorers discovering new territories in the late Victorian era, like the English imperialist explorers of Carroll's time, Alice intrudes on foreign lands with preconceived notions about language, manners, and the way the world works. When she meets the living flowers, she discovers not only that others do not share her assumptions, but that the native population perceives her as foolish. Alice's lack of knowledge about Looking Glass world creates a culture clash in which her confusion over the flowers' explanation of why trees have bark and boughs inspires scorn in the flowers. Alice fails to understand that in Looking Glass world she must do everything backward. She gets confused when the rose advises her to quote, walk the other way, unquote, in order to reach the Red Queen. Alice relates to the Red Queen how she is lost because she does not realize that in the mirror one has to move away from an object to get closer to it. The path seems to actively punish her for failing to understand the properties of Looking Glass world, deliberately rearranging itself to get her off track. The principles of inversion do not solely affect space and distance, but also movement. The faster Alice moves, the less distance she covers, so that when she runs, she never seems to leave her initial position. Alice becomes a pawn in the game of chess and discovers that Looking Glass world closely follows the strict rules of chess. Alice can only move forward one square at a time, despite the fact that she seems to wield a degree of imaginative control over Looking Glass world, while the Queen seems to vanish because she can travel quickly across the board, just as a queen has greater mobility in a game of chess. As a pawn, Alice has much more restricted mobility and line of vision. Alice is not only a pawn in the game of chess, but also in the text of the book. The author, that is Lewis Carroll, has absolute control over Alice's actions and her movements, and he moves her around at his own will in the context of the story as if she were a pawn. We will take the analysis of the remaining chapters in the next part of the video lecture. These are the references of this presentation. I hope this presentation will be helpful to you. Thank you.